At the dawn of the 20th century, the world stood on the edge of a new era. The horrors of First World War had faded into memory, and the 1920s emerged as a decade of dazzling optimism. Factories hummed with life, cities glowed with electric light, and a spirit of progress swept across nations. For many, it felt as if humanity had finally stepped into the modern age, confident, unstoppable, and destined for prosperity. In the United States, this sense of momentum became a defining force. The country had come out of the war stronger than ever, its industries untouched by the destruction that had ravaged Europe. American factories produced not just for themselves, but for a world hungry for goods, cars, radios, refrigerators, and the promise of modern convenience. The new American dream wasn't just about survival or comfort. It was about wealth, speed, and the belief that progress itself had no limits. By the mid-1920s, the economy seemed invincible. Mass production techniques, pioneered by Henry Ford and others, made consumer goods affordable to ordinary families. The automobile, once a luxury, became a symbol of freedom and status. Roads expanded, suburbs grew, and the rhythm of daily life began to change. With every paycheck, more Americans joined the ranks of consumers, buying not just what they needed but what they desired. Credit became the great enabler of this dream. Banks, department stores, and even car companies offered easy installment plans, allowing people to buy now and pay later. For the first time, millions of Americans were living on borrowed money, but few worried. The future looked bright, and debt felt like a small price to pay for the comforts of modernity. Meanwhile, on Wall Street, the stock market became a playground for both the rich and the ordinary. Newspapers printed stories of secretaries and taxi drivers turning small savings into fortunes overnight. It seemed anyone could get rich if they played their cards right. The Dow Jones soared to record heights, and confidence became contagious. The market, people said, could only go up. But beneath this glittering surface, cracks were already forming. Productivity was rising faster than wages, meaning ordinary workers could no longer afford to buy the flood of goods being produced. Farmers who had fed armies during the war now faced collapsing prices as European agriculture recovered. In rural America, poverty deepened even as cities sparkled with wealth. Yet the stock ticker kept climbing and few wanted to see the warning signs. The culture of speculation took hold. Investors borrowed money to buy stocks, a practice known as buying on margin. With as little as 10% down, anyone could gamble on the market's rise. It was a dangerous illusion of wealth. Profits built on borrowed money, confidence built on faith. By 1928, the euphoria reached fever pitch. Politicians promised a new era of permanent prosperity. Newspapers celebrated America's financial genius. Even the newly built skyscrapers of New York, monuments of glass and steel, seemed to testify that the future would only move upward. Then came the fall. In late October 1929, the illusion shattered. The first tremors came quietly, small drops in stock prices that investors dismissed as temporary. But as panic spread, selling intensified. On October 24th, Black Thursday, the market plunged. Thousands of investors rushed to sell, but few could find buyers. Within days, fortunes vanished. On October 29th, known forever as Black Tuesday, the bottom fell out. Over 16 million shares changed hands, and billions of dollars in wealth evaporated. What followed was not just a financial crisis. It was a collapse of confidence. Banks that had invested heavily in the market found themselves insolvent. Ordinary people, desperate to save their deposits, lined up outside bank doors. Many arrived too late. When a bank closed its doors, savings disappeared overnight. By 1930, the Great Depression had begun. Unemployment soared to unprecedented levels. Factories shut down, farms went bankrupt, and bread lines stretched through city streets. In a nation that had once celebrated abundance, hunger and despair became daily realities. The psychological impact was devastating. People who had believed in limitless progress now questioned everything: the government, the economy, even the fairness of the system itself. It wasn't just money that was lost, it was faith. Around the world, the crisis spread like wildfire. Germany, still burdened by reparations from World War I, faced economic ruin. Britain, France, and countless others saw their currencies weaken and industries falter. The global economy, once linked by trade and optimism, now fell into a spiral of protectionism and fear. Leaders struggled to respond. In the United States, President Herbert Hoover urged patience, insisting recovery was around the corner. But the crisis deepened. By 1932, 1 in 4 Americans was unemployed. Families lost their homes and traveled in search of work. Makeshift communities of the homeless, known as Hoovervilles, sprang up on the outskirts of cities, stark symbols of a nation brought to its knees. When Franklin D. Roosevelt took office in 1933, he inherited a broken economy and a broken people. His promise of a New Deal was more than a policy, it was a lifeline. Through massive public works programs, banking reforms, and social safety nets, Roosevelt aimed not only to restart the economy, but to restore hope. It was a radical shift, the idea that government had a duty to protect its citizens from the chaos of unregulated capitalism. Gradually, the tide turned. The stock market stabilized. Confidence returned, slowly and unevenly. Yet full recovery would not come until the mobilization for World War II. It was war, not policy, that finally reignited industry and put millions back to work. Still, the lessons of the Great Depression were seared into memory. That markets could not rise forever, that confidence could not replace reality, and that unchecked speculation carried a terrible cost. Nearly a century later, those lessons echo once again. In 2025, the global economy stands at a crossroads that feels hauntingly familiar. Technological innovation and easy money have fueled another era of extraordinary growth, one driven by data, artificial intelligence, and digital markets rather than steel and railroads. The modern skyscrapers are servers, algorithms, and global networks. Wealth has multiplied, but so have the inequalities beneath it. Much like the 1920s, the new age has been built on optimism and access, and on debt. Corporate borrowing, consumer credit, and speculative investment have all soared. Markets rise to record highs, driven not just by performance but by the expectation that they must continue to rise. Once again, people talk of a new economy, immune to old rules. Digital assets and tech stocks have become the symbols of modern prosperity, much as railroads and automobiles once were. Yet behind the sleek design and advanced algorithms lies a familiar fragility: overvaluation, speculation, and the illusion of endless growth. When profits become detached from reality, history warns us that the correction is never gentle. The global pandemic of the early 2020s triggered unprecedented government spending and stimulus, pouring trillions into the economy. It was a necessary response, but it also unleashed waves of inflation, pushing central banks to raise interest rates. The result: a tightening of credit, rising costs of living, and growing tension between debt and income. The old fault lines are back, only now in digital form. The psychological patterns are also strikingly similar. In the 1920s, it was Wall Street. In the 2020s, it's online trading platforms, crypto exchanges, and social media-driven hype. The tools have changed, but the emotions, greed, fear, and the dream of fast wealth remain the same. As in the past, warnings often go unheard. Economists who speak of over-leveraged systems or speculative bubbles are dismissed as pessimists. The crowd prefers optimism. And just as in the late 1920s, when the air was filled with talk of endless prosperity, today's conversations often center on disruption, innovation, and the idea that this time, it's different. But history suggests it never truly is. When markets rise faster than productivity, when debt grows faster than income, when speculation outpaces regulation, These are the tremors that precede collapse. The cycle may take years to play out, but the pattern rarely breaks. The Great Depression was not just an economic event. It was a human reckoning, a reminder that confidence without foundation cannot endure. Still, history is not destiny. The very reason we study the past is to learn from it, to recognize the signs before they become disasters. In 2025, the world has far more tools than it did a century ago. Data analytics, global cooperation, and institutions designed to manage crises. The question is not whether we can avoid another collapse, but whether we will act in time. There are hopeful signs. Many governments are moving to regulate digital assets, strengthen banking safeguards, and invest in sustainable growth rather than unchecked speculation. The global economy has also become more interconnected, allowing for coordinated responses to instability. But interconnectedness cuts both ways. What begins as a small shock in one sector can ripple across continents in days. The 1920s taught us that prosperity built on imbalance cannot last. The 1930s taught us that recovery demands both reform and empathy. And perhaps 2025 will teach us whether those lessons have truly been learned. Ultimately, the story of the Great Depression is not only about markets and money. It is about people, their dreams, their resilience, and their capacity to rebuild. From the ashes of that crisis came social reforms, safety nets, and the understanding that economies exist to serve societies, not the other way around. It was a hard-earned wisdom, paid for in hardship. As we stand nearly a century later, with technology transforming our world faster than ever before, it's easy to believe we've outgrown the mistakes of the past. But progress is not immunity. The same human impulses, ambition, fear, confidence still shape our choices. The challenge is not to suppress them, but to balance them with memory. Because history doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes. And every generation must decide whether to listen to the echo. The lesson of the 1920s and the Great Depression is simple, yet profound. Unchecked optimism can build wonders, but also illusions. When society confuses speculation with progress and confidence with truth, the fall is only a matter of time. Yet each collapse also brings a chance to rebuild, to reform, and to remember. In that sense, the Great Depression is not just history, it's a mirror. What it reflects depends on how clearly we choose to look.